The Golden State Warriors are going through one of those moments that almost never appear in the history of the league. It is not simply about stacking up wins, competing for trophies, or maintaining the respect they have earned over the years. The issue now is deeper, almost existential. The organization that changed the way basketball is played across the entire world finds itself facing an uncomfortable question. Is it possible to remain great without tearing everything down? Is it possible to extend a dynasty without hitting the full rebuild button? For those in the stands, everything looks the same. The crowd sings, celebrates, throws their arms up at every three-pointer, feels the same shiver when the team strings together a sequence of brilliant plays. The mystique is still there, but anyone watching closely realizes something has changed. The veterans are still leading the way, only now every step carries the weight of years of battles, accumulated injuries, and a body that no longer responds with the same explosiveness as before. They remain decisive, still capable of moments of genius, but they know, deep down, that the clock stops for no one. For the first time in a long time, Golden State are not looking only at the top of the mountain. They are starting to seriously face the path that comes after the peak. And it is precisely in this space between glory and transition that the whispers appear, the risky ideas, the scenarios that, until very recently, would have seemed like exaggeration. Among these possibilities, one specific name has started to circulate more strongly, generating division, debates, and a lot of imagination. Ja Morant, an electric, explosive, unpredictable point guard, capable of changing a game with a single play. He does not appear as a concrete target, there is no open negotiation, but the mere idea of seeing him wearing Golden State's colors is enough to make many people stop and think. Could he be the spark of a new era? Morant embodies exactly what an aging roster usually looks for, even if it does not admit it. Youth, aggressiveness, verticality, raw energy. The kind of athlete who makes the arena rise to its feet just by the way he runs in transition. On the other hand, he also carries an unpredictable side, an intense personality, a playing style that requires a strong structure around him to work at the highest level. And Golden State know better than anyone that talent alone is not enough. The fit has to be technical, but above all, cultural. In Memphis, Morant's trajectory has been a roller coaster. At certain moments, he looks like a comet, piling up highlights that go straight into the league's recent history. At others, he gives the feeling of being disconnected, stuck between the desire to be the center of everything and the need to find a bigger purpose within a collective system. Some executives see more than just a player in him. They see a turning point, a chance to link two different eras within the same franchise. Under the guidance of experienced leaders, in an environment that demands discipline, reading of the game, and responsibility, Morant could channel all that energy into real impact. Less chaos, more intention. Less random impulse, more conscious decisions. And this is where the question that hangs over the background comes in. Would the environment Golden State have built over the years be exactly what he needs to evolve? And, at the same time, could he not be precisely the ingredient Golden State need to reignite their competitive fire? The foundations of this franchise have always been collectivism, intelligence, and competitive humility. Set plays, yes, but with conscious freedom. A culture in which the extra pass is not an obligation, but an instinct, where individual brilliance is born from the collective fit and not the other way round. For a player like Morant, this could mean the difference between being merely an athletic phenomenon and becoming the leader of a new phase. But the point guard is not the only name floating around in the background. In more discreet conversations, in quiet phone calls, another profile has started being mentioned frequently: Bam Adebayo, a center who does not attract every camera with spectacle, but who has earned absolute respect through his consistency, defensive intelligence, and the way he holds a system together. He is not the guy of cinematic dunks, but he is the kind of player who silently keeps an entire team standing. At the Miami Heat, Adebayo has established himself as a reference. He does a bit of everything: protects the rim, switches onto guards, wings, and bigs, organizes the offense in handoff actions, delivers high-level tactical reading. He is the type of athlete every coach dreams of having. For Golden State, he represents something even more symbolic: stability, maturity, continuity. The theoretical fit is seductive, a game that demands mobility in the paint, the ability to defend in switches, an understanding of spacing and high-post passing. All of that speaks directly to the franchise's philosophy. In a system that values players who think before acting, Adebayo looks tailor-made. He would not be just another piece. He would be a kind of hub around which everything could revolve. On the defensive end, his versatility would allow the concept of collective defense to stay alive for longer. He could guard multiple positions, cover gaps, correct mistakes, sustain the last line of the wall. On offense, he would not just be a finisher. He could function as a secondary organizer, generating cuts, screens, passes for shooters, and real-time reads of off-ball movement. In a team that has always valued intelligence as much as skill, that carries enormous weight. Only, to bring in a player of that level, there is no path without sacrifice. The name most cited in possible trade scenarios is Jonathan Kuminga's, an impressive physical talent, with a very high ceiling but still in the polishing phase. He represents the distant tomorrow, the kind of potential that could explode a few years from now. Adebayo, on the other hand, symbolizes immediate impact, the chance to prolong the peak of a core that still does not want to accept the idea of the cycle ending. This kind of decision does not fit only in projection charts or advanced stats tables. It involves instinct, vision, and courage. Some specialists within the franchise repeat the same logic. Sometimes the biggest mistake is not giving up something valuable, but hesitating when the opportunity to transform the team appears. And at Golden State, no one wants to be remembered as the group that waited too long. While executives, analysts, and decision-makers debate in closed rooms, something even deeper unfolds inside the locker room. There, things are not said in official statements. They are perceived in looks, quick conversations, subtle changes in posture. There is a collective awareness that the cycle is changing. It is not a dramatic ending, but an inevitable transition. The more experienced players no longer see the younger ones just as potential replacements, but as part of a bigger mission. They understand that the job now is not only to protect titles, but to prepare heirs. It is not yet about stepping aside, but making sure that, when that moment comes, the team's identity is safe in other hands. The legacy this generation wants to leave is not measured only in trophies, but in the culture that continues after them. Stephen Curry, with his calm manner and almost pedagogical leadership, has been approaching the youngsters in a different way. It is not just to adjust shooting mechanics or teach offensive moves. It is to pass on game vision, to teach how to deal with pressure, how to keep joy alive amid the weight of responsibility. He knows that the greatest lesson he can leave is not only in the shots that fall, but in the way he treats each possession as part of something bigger. Draymond Green, in turn, has transformed the fire that has always defined him into a kind of emotional compass. He is still intense, still demanding, still arguing, but now he also guides, explains, translates what it means to be part of this story. He understands that his influence goes beyond the box score. What he says in the locker room echoes in the attitudes of the younger players on the court. This environment is perhaps the franchise's greatest asset, because talented players can fit into any team, but only a few can align with an already established culture and, on top of that, elevate it. Golden State's biggest bet is not just to swap names on the roster. It is to preserve a way of being that the whole world has learned to respect. That is why the word rebuild is avoided as much as possible inside the organization. The term most heard behind the scenes is another: evolution. They are not thinking about implosion, starting from scratch, throwing away everything that has been built. The idea is to change without losing the essence, to reshape without tearing up their own identity. And this silent, calculated process started a long time ago. In practice sessions, the coaching staff have been experimenting with more physical lineups, more vertical formations, more aggressive approaches on both defense and offense. It is not just about adjusting the team for the next game. It is about testing what might work in the coming years. Rotations are being studied not only with the present in mind, but with one eye fixed on the trends emerging around the league. In the analytics departments, the screens do not show only cold numbers. They display trajectories, patterns, subtle changes in the playing style of the NBA as a whole. It is already clear that basketball is heading into a new phase in which versatility will be valued even more. Fewer rigid positional labels, more hybrids capable of doing a bit of everything. And it is precisely in this scenario that figures like Adebayo and Morant gain extra symbolism. One represents the backbone of a collective system, the other, the creative engine capable of breaking down defenses on his own. One is the foundation, the cement that holds everything together. The other is the spark that lights the offensive fire. From the franchise's point of view, it is not just about choosing a player. It is about choosing what kind of future they want to build. Only, Golden State have never been a team of easy answers. The organization has always preferred more complex paths, where risk and vision walk side by side. That is why, behind the scenes, the idea is growing that the ideal solution may not lie in or, but in and. It is not about choosing between structure and chaos. It is about finding a way to make both forces coexist within the same project. This discussion is starting to take shape in internal meetings, tactical presentations, and advanced data cross-checks. Analysts study how Morant's aggressive style could be guided, not shackled, within a system that values passing, cutting, and off-ball movement. At the same time, they build scenarios in which Adebayo becomes not only the protector of the paint, but the pillar that allows everything else to function at another level. Inside the decision-making core, however, there are different views on the best path. Some see the current roster as a competitive sunset, still beautiful, still impactful, but inevitably heading towards the end. From that perspective, the response would be straightforward. Act now. Move big pieces. Accept the pain of change in exchange for an immediate renewal. Others believe that the transition process is already underway naturally, like a mirror in which the youngsters absorb day by day the emotional and tactical codes of the veterans. And it is precisely at this point that a third line of thought emerges, perhaps the most ambitious of all, which does not want merely to preserve what already exists, nor simply to start something new from scratch, but to reinvent what has already been built, mixing past and future within the same structure. This third vision does not see the current roster as something that needs to be dismantled, nor the youngsters as loose pieces waiting for a chance. It sees everything as a living organism in the process of mutation. The idea is not to replace one identity with another, but to expand the original identity so that it can contain a new generation without erasing the previous one. From this point of view, Golden State would stop being just the team that revolutionized the perimeter and become the franchise that learned to evolve without collapsing. This is where names like Bam Adebayo and Ja Morant stop being just market rumors and start functioning as symbols. They represent, each in their own way, the two faces of this reinvention: solidity and unpredictability, structure and spark, discipline and creative chaos. Behind the scenes, this third current has begun gaining strength precisely because it speaks to what the organization has always been. The team has never been limited to having stars. It has always sought something beyond that: synergy, purpose, meaning. That is why any major move has to make sense on every level. It is not enough for it to fit financially or look attractive from a basketball standpoint. Above all, it has to respect the soul of the franchise. In this context, the coaching department have thrown themselves fully into detailed analysis. Not just videos, not just numbers, but cross-referencing movement data, heat maps, decision patterns, reaction times, behavior under pressure. With Morant, for example, the study showed that, although his game looks extremely individualistic, there are moments when he instinctively reads teammates' cuts and opens passing lanes purely through the threat of his drives. On other teams, that ends up underused, trapped in less dynamic systems. At Golden State, however, that same trait could be enhanced. The threat of an explosive drive slicing through the first line of defense forces' defenses to collapse into the paint. In a system with constant movement, that would mean open shooters, clearer cuts, more passing options, individual chaos feeding collective order. The analysts arrived at a conclusion that has been circulating in internal conversations. Morant does not need to stop being aggressive. He needs to learn how to be aggressive for a bigger reason. Instead of attacking the rim just to score, attack the rim to open up the game. Instead of being the end of the play, be the trigger of the play. And this kind of transformation does not come from a spreadsheet. It comes from environment, from day-to-day interaction, from culture. With Adebayo, the findings were just as striking. By breaking down his offensive actions in Miami, it became clear that he already performs many of the elements Golden State consider fundamental. Well-timed handoffs, screens in motion, passes with his back to the basket, reading of backdoor cuts, patience to let the play develop before making a decision. In other words, he already speaks a kind of dialect of basketball that the franchise have been speaking for years. On defense, there is hardly anything that needs to be said. His ability to survive in switches, to contain quick guards, to protect the rim without committing silly fouls, all of this speaks directly to the concept of collective defense that sustained the team at their peak. The idea of having him as a defensive anchor while the offensive system revolves around reading and movement seems, to some, almost too obvious to ignore. But none of this exists in a vacuum. Every potential arrival demands a potential departure. That is why names like Kuminga return to the center of the debate. Inside the franchise, no one is naive. Everyone knows the young forward's value. They know he could become, within a few years, one of the most physically dominant players in the league. They know that giving him up means betting that Adebayo's immediate impact will make up for everything Kuminga might turn into. And this is where the emotional weight of the decision comes in. Because it is not only about projecting numbers, it is about projecting stories. On one side, you have a youngster who has grown within your culture, who has been developed under the eyes of your veterans, who has learned to speak the team's tactical language. On the other, a player who is already polished, ready, who can raise the team's competitive ceiling right now. Which legacy weighs more? The legacy of internal development or the legacy of competitive continuity? While these questions are being debated, everyday life goes on. Practices, film sessions, trips, games. But in the breaks, in corridor conversations, the subject returns. Some veterans are open to the idea of deep changes, as long as the cultural core is respected. Others, more conservative, argue that it is possible to go further with what already exists, as long as the pieces are used in a bolder way. In the middle of all this, Curry occupies a unique position. He is, at the same time, the greatest reference of the golden era and the thread that connects past and future. His voice carries a weight that goes beyond that of a star. When he speaks, everyone listens. And, according to internal accounts, the message he has repeated does not revolve around names, but around mentality. For him, the essential thing is that any player who comes in understands that playing there is not only about winning games, but about how you win games. He insists on the idea of purpose. He reminds the younger players in conversations of how things were when the team still were not the team. When criticism came from all sides, when no one believed an offense based on extreme spacing and a high volume of threes could dominate the league. He recounts how trust was built step by step, how the team had to believe in something before the world did. And he stresses that this spirit cannot be lost, no matter what happens on the market. Draymond, in turn, works behind the scenes as an emotional filter. He feels the mood of the group, senses who is tense, who is excited, who is insecure. He uses humor when he needs to lighten the atmosphere, and he is harsh when he feels someone is relaxing too much. He knows that in moments of transition, any crack can become a problem. That is why he insists on an unwritten rule. No one is allowed to get comfortable. Not the veterans, not the youngsters, not the coaching staff. The result is that practices have gradually become a sort of emotional lab. It is not just about testing different lineups, but about seeing who reacts how when things do not go as planned. Who takes responsibility in moments of chaos? Who can calm the team when everything is falling apart? Who speaks in the huddle? Who listens in the huddle? These small answers say much more than any number. Over the years, Golden State have learned that statistics tell the story of what has happened, but do not always predict what will happen when the pressure is at its highest. That is why the coaching staff pays so much attention to invisible details. The look after a mistake, the posture after being taken out of the starting lineup, the attitude when going back to the bench after a good stretch. Away from the cameras, another movement has started to take shape: the silent recognition of opponents. For a long time, other franchises tried to copy the Warriors' style, multiplying three-point attempts without truly understanding what sustained that model. Now, with the passing of time, the stance has changed. There is almost a strategic respect. No one wants to be the team that underestimates an organization that has already proved it knows how to reinvent itself. Some rival executives comment, off the record, that what Golden State are about to attempt is something no team has managed to pull off successfully on a large scale, crossing generations while keeping the same competitive essence, but with different faces. Not just living through a great spell, but turning that spell into a platform for a new one. Not just opening a title window, but building an entire house on top of that window. Meanwhile, the market remains alert. Agents and representatives often ask themselves quietly, what kind of player is really ready to wear that jersey? Not for status, not for the contract, but for what it represents. Not every athlete is prepared to let go of statistical protagonism in the name of a system that demands reading, sacrifice, and patience. And precisely because of that, the franchise attracts a specific profile: players who want to belong to something bigger. The youngest players on the roster have already realized that the environment there is not normal. Many of them say in conversations among themselves that they have never learned so much about basketball without necessarily being in an official game. Post-practice discussions go beyond plays. They include concepts such as emotional rhythm, body language, reading the arena's mood, the psychological impact of a sequence of mistakes, and the importance of a good timeout at the right moment. They discover that being an heir in that context means much more than taking minutes on the court. It means assuming a spiritual responsibility, representing a way of playing, a way of reacting to adversity, a culture. And this sinks in precisely when veterans, staff, and front office repeat, almost ritually, the same word: legacy. That is why the notion of heir has gained so much strength internally. Golden State are not just looking for reinforcements. They are looking for people who can carry forward what has been built. Adebayo, in that sense, is seen as someone capable of taking on the role of guardian of the defensive culture, a silent yet unshakable pillar. Morant, on the other hand, would be a kind of new offensive face, not to replace idols, but to open a new chapter in the same saga. On the outside, the Bay Area can feel something in the air. It is not just the expectation of a new signing or curiosity over a potential blockbuster trade. It is a collective intuition that the franchise is facing one of those moments that, later on, will be remembered as a turning point, a dividing line between how it was and how it became. Some fans want radical changes. They argue that it is time to let go of historic names and fully prepare the ground for the future. Others want to squeeze every last drop out of the veterans, believing they still have enough fuel for one more serious run to the top. Between these extremes, there is a large majority who, even without using technical terms, understand what the club is trying to do: buy time without losing identity. That is exactly the feeling that makes all of this so fascinating. Because, in the end, Golden State are trying to face the greatest opponent a team can have: time. Not the time on the shot clock, but the time of history. That invisible force that topples dynasties, erases great moments, turns giants into distant memories. The question that hangs over the franchise is simple and enormous at the same time. Is it possible to beat time without betraying what made you great? Is it possible to reinvent yourself without losing who you are? Is it possible at the same time to embrace the chaos of a player like Morant and the structure of someone like Adebayo inside a locker room that already has a solid hierarchy and a heavy history? The answers do not exist yet. There is no official announcement, no confirmed trade, no prepared statement. What exists is a process, a silent, ongoing process almost invisible to the naked eye, but one that is reorganizing priorities, beliefs, and long-term plans. A process that passes through every conversation between coaches and players, through every meeting between executives and analysts, through every practice in which veterans hand over the spotlight to the youngsters just to see how they react. Perhaps in the future, when they look back, everyone will realize that the real transformation did not begin with a big signing or a shocking trade, but with a shift in mentality, with the decision not to accept the word end as an inevitable sentence, but as an invitation to reinvention. And it is precisely at this point that you, the fan, come into this story. Because this transition, no matter how strategic and well-planned it may be, is also emotional. It needs those who believe, those who follow closely, those who feel that every move, every rumor, every rotation change is part of something bigger. If you want to keep up with every step of this Golden State transformation, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. That really strengthens our work and ensures you do not miss the next chapters.